Welcome on to the show, Christina Hoff Sommers, back on the show, but we finally get the chance to talk to her, which Pete and I are very excited about. Co-host of the podcast, Femsplainers. Everyone should be listening to that one. Christina, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back.
All right, brilliant. Now, we want to talk to a whole bunch of things with you, especially that Q&A interview, which was out of control. But the first thing, I was watching your interview on Real Time with Bill Maher, I think 2 months ago now, and you triggered a dog. So would you like to take this opportunity to apologise to the dog that you triggered?
Come on, Christina.
I will. Well, the dog wasn't on the Bill Maher show. The dog was in the audience at a very, very liberal elite college called Oberlin. And I was there to speak about feminism, which I had done at the time. This was in 2016. I have spoken about feminism at campuses for many years, and typically there would be an exchange between some women's studies professors and me because I occupy a different point on the sort of spectrum between radicalism and moderation. I'm more moderate, they're more radical. Anyway, at Oberlin, I go there in 2016, and suddenly this idea of being triggered, this kind of fainting couch feminism where women are constantly rushing to safe spaces and everything is triggering them and they feel unsafe and they need to be honored and validated and so forth. Well, during my talk at Oberlin, 30 students and a therapy dog fled to a safe space. And to this day, I feel bad about the dog. I triggered a dog.
I love that term, fainting couch feminism. Do you want to tell people what that is to you? Because I just absolutely love that concept.
Well, I consider myself an equity or equality feminist. I want to be equal to men. Fainting couch feminists want protection from them. They think of men, first of all, as a monolith. You know, like some men, because some men behave badly, some men are violent. They commit the fallacy of thinking all men are violent, and they indict all men or implicate all men anyway. And they're constantly seeking protection from male vulgarity. Now, it's one thing to have laws, which we must, and I fought for them as a feminist. The laws against harassment, and certainly better. Ways to enforce laws against sexual violence. I'm not talking about protecting women from crimes. I'm talking about protecting women from jokes or for women, young women who think that they're going to be triggered or threatened if they have to read The Great Gatsby and there's a scene of violence in the book. That will be triggering them. And this culture of fragility that has been done in the name of feminism, and that's not my feminism. My feminism is about equality, strength, empowerment, not running off to and acting like a delicate, fragile little bird.
All right, we'll get into that a little bit more in a second, but I do want to grab your opinion on that Q&A episode. We did talk about it a couple of weeks ago on the show. Did that make waves in America? Because I did notice you tweeted about that, I believe.
Well, it triggered me. I couldn't believe it. Actually, I have to tell you, I've seen a lot of crazy things, but you would not see that on public television in the United States. I mean, those women were so extreme, calling for violence, and there was that visiting journalist who Mona El-Tahawi, I guess her name is, an Egyptian American, and she says, I want patriarchy to be scared, and she was carrying on about how, she didn't believe in the police, but she still thought that women had to start, taking things into their own hands, so she was advocating vigilante justice, and then throwing around, and nobody on the panel, not one person. I think later I read that one member who'd been pretty quiet was sorry she hadn't spoken up, but no one spoke up. Not the moderator, I think it was Fran Kelly. The other women escalated and thought it was actually a good idea for women to use violence. Now, that is so insane and so antisocial and regressive. It's almost as if feminism is being replaced by a kind of barbarism.
Christina, you did mention that was a very extreme panel. One of the things that annoys me a little bit about feminism is that people that are more moderate, as you describe yourself, more moderate feminists, don't seem to get a look in. So they've assembled a panel that's meant to talk about feminism, but there's no balance to it. There's no people like yourself. There's no people that women that work at our organisation that also should have been included in a panel like that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think the extreme end of the spectrum seems to get such a bigger look in than people like yourself?
I don't know why that happens at ABC. And for example, it's like I visited Australia last spring to debate Roxanne Gay, and the ABC, I think the show The Drum, they had Roxanne on, but didn't have me on. And I was interviewed by the Sydney News, and they interviewed me as if I was, they didn't interview me. They interviewed her and characterized me as some kind of dangerous far-right deviant. And it was ridiculous. So something's strange, I think, with your media there. I haven't seen anything quite that imbalanced. And as you said, they could have called someone from any number of organizations, liberal feminists. These women were the most radical, more radical than that, you implode.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because Fran Kelly, who was the host of the episode, later had to apologize, thinking one of them was bound to come out against the concept of vigilante justice roaming the streets, but no one did. So I think they just completely missed that. The other thing I want to ask, so episodes like that, we have 5 people saying that things are so bad for women in the West right now that the only solution we are left with is vigilante justice, marauding gangs roaming the streets trying to find people and hurt them. Now, this isn't where, I'm not saying things are perfect out there, obviously, but we're certainly not a vigilante justice need. So what is this long-term effect going to be for all the young women who watch these episodes, hear these debates and sort of go, oh, maybe it is bad for us out there? Is there a long-term psychological aspect to this?
Well, these women are in a gender war. And as they say, in all wars, the first casualty is truth. And truth has been sacrificed to propaganda in this feminist crusade. They use statistics of their own, or what I would call advocacy statistics, studies done by people out to to promote a cause rather than to find the truth. And so I heard from the panel that the journalist was Mona El-Flahi was saying that we're getting killed and we're getting battered and we're getting beaten. Well, it's true there are still crimes going on. Probably more men are getting killed, and if it's typical in the United States, men are more likely to be victims of homicide. But apart from that, it's still small numbers, and relative to the population, she's acting like these crimes are illustrative of the criminals. They're illustrative of, or are sort of stand-ins, tokens of every man, and that. She's living in. This is a distortion of reality, so distorted. Australia may have its problems. The United States has probably more problems than, as far as crime is concerned. But compared to what? Compared to what is she thinking? I'm speechless. I'm babbling because it's so extreme to think of, contemporary Australia as deadly dangerous for the average woman. It's just not true.
You're definitely not babbling. You're definitely making more sense than any person on the Q&A show that episode, but and pretty much any episode to be honest. But what I'm trying to get at is, there's a whole generation of young women out there, and if they, if some of them watched Q&A and they didn't, check Twitter the next day to see the one panelist that was actually maybe vigilante justice isn't the way to go, they're only fed that narrative. That's their only sort of look into the debate. they're going to have like a completely warped sense of like, they're going to be too scared to walk out on the streets. They're too scared to go out at night. Like, is that the message we want to be promoting?
Well, here's what I think. I think here's what happens is there are going to be some who will respond that way. There are going to be others, a majority of sensible people who are going to listen and know at some level that this is just out of control rhetoric, and they are going to think less of feminism. And in fact, if you look at most polls, I've seen them in Australia, I've seen them in England, and I've seen them in the United States. The majority people, pollsters ask, do not identify as feminist. You get rather small numbers, and the number one reason given is that people think it's too radical, and that the kinds of feminism we have today are not feminism at its best.
So how do we achieve that, Christina? We've talked today about a more liberal feminism, and there's certainly issues out there that warrant talking about in regards to women, and that I think most people would be prepared to get on board with a discussion about that without, upending the whole system. So how do we achieve a more liberal feminism?
Well, the first thing is to find out, I stress this a lot. I have a video series called The Factual Feminist. And the first thing in almost every video, I say that you can't help people with twisted statistics and spin and hyperbole. If you want to help women who are at risk for violence, if you want to help women or anyone at risk of injustice, get your facts straight. Get some good research. And don't go with the most what happens is these, I don't know what came first, like their credulousness for feminist propaganda, and that caused them to be radical, or where they were just radical and they were open to the propaganda. I don't know what came first, but what I do know is that it's that young women have to be. If you want to do anything to advance women, you've got to have good research and stop this constant flow of propaganda. And this propaganda is discouraging to young women. Either they're sensible and it turns them off feminism altogether, which isn't a good thing, or they believe it. And then they think the whole world is rigged against them. Now, to be a young woman, especially a college young woman, in Melbourne or in Sydney or in any major city in the United States, is to be privileged across ethnicities, across races. It's to have more power and to be more self-determining than almost any woman in history. That is not the moment you sweep down and tell her with this fainting couch feminism and tell her that the world is out to get her. It's not.
Brilliant. All right, Christina Hoff Sommers, for anyone that's listening like on a speakerphone and their dog's acting up, we apologise. Apparently Christina has that effect on dogs. But anyway, Christina, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Christina.